سنة وثلاث اشهر حلا تخلص الوسطى.
Good afternoon, you're watching the English newscast on Future Television. I'm Lynette Sneem, and these are today's headlines. Hundreds turned out to bid farewell to the 7 family members who drowned last week when their migrant boat capsized in the Aegean Sea. Prime Minister Tamam Slam says he may resign in the coming days if the garbage crisis isn't quickly resolved. And U.S. Secretary of State John Kerry is in Germany as part of a trip to Europe and the Middle East aimed at finding ways to ease the violence between Israelis and Palestinians. Hundreds turned out to bid farewell to the 7 Lebanese who drowned last week when their migrant boat capsized in the Aegean Sea. Heavy gunfire could be heard as caskets holding members of the Safwan family arrived at their home in the southern Beirut suburb of Uzai, where relatives, neighbors and friends gathered to pay their respects. 2 members of the family are still missing from last Wednesday's accident when their migrant boat traveling from Turkey to Greece sank. Only 3 survived, who arrived in Lebanon early this morning. A 3rd member of the family remains in custody in Ankara. Prime Minister Tamam Slam hinted he may resign in the coming days if the garbage crisis isn't quickly resolved. Salam told students at USG that he would only abandon his position in order to press the political rivals to assume their responsibilities and not to cover up for them, according to remarks posted on the National News Agency website. He lashed out at bickering political rivals, saying their lack of awareness was taking hold and there was no need for a cabinet that cannot convene. Salam also criticized rivals who accused him of trying to take on the role of a president and neglecting his tasks amid the presidential vacuum. He called for the election of a consensual head of state from outside the political spectrum to resolve the ongoing crisis. The We Want Accountability campaign has held a new protest outside Électricité du Liban's Beirut headquarters to demand round-the-clock power and reduce prices. A campaign statement said activists will not stand for the privatization of the electricity sector in Lebanon, vowing to hold politicians who are not paying their electricity bills accountable. At the end of the protest, demonstrators headed to Beirut's Karantina area, where they demonstrated near the headquarters of the waste management company Suclean, which they also accuse of corruption. That protest led to a heavy traffic jam on the Karantina highway. The Military Appeals Court has adjourned the retrial of former Information Minister Michel Smeha to November 26th to allow defense attorneys to examine video and audio recordings made by a police informer. A judicial source said Smeha's lawyers had not been able to review the recordings due to routine shuffling of military personnel. The recordings, which depict conversations between Smeha and police informer Milad Kfouri, will reportedly be scrutinized by Smeha's lawyers at the military courtroom next Thursday. The footage shows Smeha ordering Kfouri to carry out attacks against prominent Lebanese political figures. The videos also indicate that Syrian President Bashar al-Assad and Syrian National Security Bureau Chief Major General Ali Mamlouk were aware of the plot. Smeha, who was arrested on August 9th of 2012, has been previously convicted of conspiring to commit acts of terrorism and was sentenced to 4.5 years in prison. The Beirut Institute Summit has taken place in Abu Dhabi earlier this month under the theme Reconfiguring the Arab Region and its Global Space Beyond Political Economy and Security Threats. The summit hosted political leaders, senior policymakers, prominent thinkers, major CEOs and civil society leaders. Future TV correspondent Shahir Dries was on site and brought us an exclusive interview with UN Special Coordinator for Lebanon, Sigrid Kaag, regarding the situation in Lebanon and the region. Have a listen.
Inside the room I spoke indeed about the importance of Arab states investing more in prevention, mediation and preventive diplomacy. Because our panel, as you know, spoke a lot of security and the response to security threats, which in a way is when we've all failed, or we've failed to prevent a situation from getting worse. I mean, inside we touched on the situation in Syria, Iraq, the broader region. Of course, dialogue is critical, And we always commend all leaders, be it in Lebanon or elsewhere, to invest in dialogue. Dialogue at the same time, of course, is also expected to achieve results and a change process. And that is, I think, in this case, when we look at Lebanon, it's an important investment. There's a legitimate expectation, I think, by citizens that dialogue produces decisions, change. But for Lebanon, the voice of the Security Council and the International Support Group has been very clear on the different issues, addressing the issue of the presidency, be it the functioning of the government, and the expectation of, transparent and functioning supported state institutions.
How do you see the situation in the region now?
It's a mixed scorecard, if you had to give it a scorecard. We talked also in the panel I was at, of course, on countries that have the opportunity still to invest in development, building a knowledge economy, to the ultimate breakdown through conflicts that we see in Syria because of crisis and the tremendous refugee flows and human rights violations that have occurred. So it's mixed, but I'm in the business of working with others to support the national institutions, in this case in Lebanon, of course, but if we look at it globally, the United Nations and the international communities is always there to build peace, help to restore peace, and invest in the region. I'm a firm believer in the big potential of the people of this region, women, men, girls, boys. A lot of history, a lot of knowledge, a lot of drive. We also talk about innovation, the opportunity to innovate, to do small startups, to create jobs. This is critical. We need to build a program for the youth of this region. They're educated, they're talented, they want to stay in their region, they want to build new societies that need to be inclusive. I think that is, of course, part of the UN's vision, but more importantly, it is really to be the vision of the region, and we hear that in a lot of national development programs, but it needs to be politically supported as much as you can plan. You need political leadership to drive this.
Do you think Lebanon can handle the refugees problem for a long time without real help?
Well, Lebanon has done, of course, remarkably well, and the generosity of the Lebanese citizens, communities that have hosted Syrian refugees, and of course before them already a long time, the presence of the Palestine refugee population in Lebanon. Lebanon has done remarkably well, but my message always to the Council is one that we cannot take Lebanon for granted. It needs more support, and we need to look at sustainable investments, because any refugee crisis is likely to be protracted, to be there for a long period of time. We need to continue to have Syrian refugee children in school alongside Lebanese vulnerable children to create opportunities for them. We need to look at health, and of course the economic impact of the Syria crisis has been significant on Lebanon. That's why with the World Bank and other institutions we're looking at modalities whereby we can shore up and shield Lebanon from the consequences of the Syria crisis.
Coming up next, one person is killed in a stabbing attack in Sweden. More details right next. Welcome back. You're watching the English newscast. U.S. Secretary of State John Kerry has arrived in Germany as part of a trip to Europe and the Middle East aimed at finding ways to ease the violence between Israelis and Palestinians. Kerry urged both sides to halt all incitement and violence, kicking off a flurry of diplomatic activity through talks with Israel's Benjamin Netanyahu aimed at ending the escalating unrest. The meeting came as another Israeli was wounded in a new knife attack west of Jerusalem, the latest in a spate of violence that first erupted on October 1st and has sparked fears of a new Palestinian intifada or uprising. Kerry was also due to meet with his German counterpart Frank-Walter Steinmeier and EU Foreign Policy Chief Federica Mogherini while in Berlin, before traveling on to Vienna on Friday for talks on the ongoing conflict in Syria with his Russian, Turkish and Saudi counterparts. Mogherini had officially announced that the quartet of Middle East peace mediators will meet in Vienna tomorrow to urge Israeli and Palestinian leaders to ease the situation on the ground.
I can announce here that tomorrow in Vienna we will have a quartet principals meeting, following up the one we had in New York at the margins of the General Assembly. So I will be there together with Kerry, Lavrov and the Special Envoy of the UN Secretary General, to coordinate messages, to pass a strong message to the parties to calm down the situation on the ground, to tackle the situation of the holy sites seriously and with restraint, to de-escalate also the rhetorics, and to try to start implementation of the ground of some positive steps that could lead to more confidence building.
And still in Europe, one person has been killed and several others injured in a stabbing attack in Sweden. Police say a masked man armed with a sword entered the school in the western town of Trollhättan this morning, slashing several people. At least 4 students and 1 adult were injured, as well as the attacker himself. The man, reportedly in his 20s, was initially said to be dead after he was shot by police. A medical officer later said he was alive and undergoing surgery. 2 students, aged 11 and 15, were also seriously injured and undergoing surgery. Swedish paper Expressen said the incident happened at a cafe adjacent to the school. One school student told broadcaster SVT that the attack was initially believed to be a joke. French President François Hollande says Mali will receive 360 million euros in aid from France for 2015 to 2017. Hollande spoke during a state visit by Mali's President Ibrahim Boubacar Keïta. The funding is aimed at helping rebuild the West African nation, especially its northern region, which has been torn by years of separatist Tuareg rebellion and attacks by Al-Qaeda-linked Islamists. Keïta said economic recovery from the conflict in the north, but also in all the country, would be a priority for the government following a peace accord that was signed in June in Algiers. Alphabet Incorporated's YouTube will launch a $10 a month subscription option in the United States on October 28th that lets viewers watch videos from across the site without interruption from advertisements. Starting early this year, the service called YouTube Red will add exclusive shows and movies from top YouTube creators, including PewDiePie, Lily Singh, and the Fine Brothers. The effort offers a new source of revenue for YouTube and its video creators. Rival streaming sites such as Vessel and Interactive Corp's Vimeo are luring online stars to their paid offerings, which provide creators a larger cut of revenue than they typically receive from YouTube's ad-supported videos. Facebook is also taking steps to boost video viewership on its site. YouTube, however, will continue to offer its free ad-supported service, which has more than 1 billion viewers around the world. Filomena Rotundo turned 100 years old a few months ago, but she plans to keep on working 11-hour shifts 6 days a week and says she wouldn't have it any other way. She has been working at the college laundry shop in Buffalo, New York for 40 years, washing clothes and handling dry cleaning. You wouldn't know it, but this busy lady was born in 1915. She's been earning a living for the past 85 years. At an age where most would be content to simply be above the ground, Filomena, also known as Minnie, credits her work ethic as one of the secrets to longevity. She believes 75 is a respectable age to begin considering retirement, should health be an issue. As for herself, Minnie views her future a little more open-minded.
I talk to people all day. I do a few bundles. It's being out, getting up in the morning, and you say, I have to go to work. It does something for you.
And she has a few suggestions for her peers.
A lot of you old people, get out and do something. Get out and do some work. Too many old people are retiring too young. I don't think people should be sitting idle doing nothing. That's a waste of time.
Okay. All right, keep up the good work.
This marks the end of our bulletin for today. Now for a recap of our top stories. Hundreds turn out to bid farewell to the 7 family members who drowned last week when their migrant boat capsized in the Aegean Sea. Prime Minister Tamam Slam says he may resign in the coming days if the garbage crisis isn't quickly resolved. And U.S. Secretary of State John Kerry is in Germany as part of a trip to Europe and the Middle East aimed at finding ways to ease the violence between Israelis and Palestinians. Those are your top stories for today. Yumna Naufel will be here for tomorrow's newscast, so make sure you tune in.